After Napoleon crossed the Niemen in late June, he met with little to no resistance and moved quickly into the enemy territory, reaching Vilna and Minsk in a matter of weeks. This victory came with a big cost. His rapid forced marches left many soldiers without supply, and their only options were run or starve. Desertion was high, and death from disease and heat as well. The French Marshal Macdonald, accompanied by the 10th Corps and the Prussian General Julius von Groet, who approached Riga, defeated the Russian forces of Friedrich von Louis of Mina at the Battle of Vitebsk. The Governor-General of Riga, Magnus Gustav, overestimated his opponents and ordered preparations for the siege and the burning of the suburbs. After doubt and cancellation, including those on the right bank, Commander Ivan Emy announced the partial destruction of the Moscow and St. Petersburg suburbs, and on the evening of July 11th, police were ordered to start the arson. The fire, wind and poor organization spiraled out of control, causing even more damage to the townspeople than planned. On July 19th, 67 Russian gunboats finally arrived in Riga, much more than those made by Thomas Byam Martin. At that time, the Prussians were located around Riga in the southern semicircle along the line Slokora-Lane-Kakova. During the siege, the Prussian army was formed of the 10th Corps with about 31,000 men and 130 siege guns, while the Russian army was formed of the garrison of Riga and the army of Finland with about 27,000 men defending the city. Louis of Mina forces launched a counterattack in a western direction, and the Russian and English gunboats supporting it, moving up the Lalyup River, managed to reach Sloka and further Kalciums. The boats moved on to Jelgava, which was shelled, but retreated from it as a Prussian artillery response fire. However, after a few days, the Prussians were able to push the Russians back from the captured territory. The siege raged on for additional time until December, when Napoleon was on retreat. In August, Macdonald counterattacked, and by September the forces in Riga received help from Stenhal Corps, which were stationed in Helsinki. At least 4 churches, 36 warehouses, 35 state and 705 residential buildings were burned down on July 12th, when the siege started and ended on December 8th. On that date, Macdonald was ordered by Napoleon to leave the city after they were retreating from Russia. Macdonald victories in Courland came to an end with this failed siege of Riga that was defended fiercely by the Russian army. The Prussian numerical superiority proved useless in this situation. While retreating from Minsk, the Russians and Davout encountered at the Battle of Saltanovka. The First Corps of Davout was formed of 22,000 infantry, 60,000 cavalry and 55 guns, while the 7th Corps of Nikolai Raevsky was formed of about 20,000 men and 90 guns. The 7th Corps advance guard of 2 Giga battalions launched an attack on Davout outpost on July 23rd, and the French general replied with an attack backed by artillery that destroyed the Russians. The 26th Russian Infantry Division assaulted Fartova in extended column formations. Davout redeployed his attacks, backed by artillery that also defeated the Russians. With 12 guns, the Russians swept through the French defense and took the village. Davout prepared an ambush that inflicted heavy casualties on the Russian side and retook the village. The Russian attack's main point was Saltanovka, and the Jaeger would act like a support with artillery for Raevsky personally led Smolensk infantry regiment to capture a dam. The assault on Fartova took place at the same time, and Raevsky started his attack too late. French artillery inflicted heavily casualties on the Russians, and Raevsky ordered a charge, allegedly with his 11 and 16-year-old sons, but the attempt failed. French prisoners informed Raevsky of the upcoming attack, and Bagration retreated to Dashkovka. Davout attacked the Russian rearguard later that day, but did not achieve results. The battle occurred as Napoleon was trying to envelop the Russian First Army at Vitebsk and force them to accept battle. The commander of the Russian First Army, General Michael Andreas Barclay de Tolly, was himself aiming to fight and thus massed the bulk of his forces at Vitebsk. Even though he was aware that his chances to win against Napoleon were not good. Barclay's motivation to make a stand resulted from political pressures and from his own desire to improve the army's morale after weeks of retreating without a fight. The fighting on 26 July had General Konovnitsin's Riga division fighting elements of the French Four Corps and ended with the Russians managing to delay the enemy for the entire day, allowing the bulk of the army to mass at Vitebsk. The Russians thus needed to abandon any plans to give battle, urgently break contact with the pursuing enemy and move southeast in an attempt to draw closer to Bagration's force. Despite these, Barclay still wanted to give battle. Meanwhile, Barclay received intelligence that Pyotr Bagration's Second Army had been defeated 3 days earlier, which meant that Barclay was forced to abandon his plan to fight a major action against Napoleon. Barclay's main concern for the day of 27 July was to keep the French at bay for long enough in order to allow his main force to escape towards Smolensk, where he planned to unite with Bagration. The task of delaying the French was assigned to General Macdonald, who succeeded in frustrating any French. At daybreak on 27 July, Napoleon set his troops in motion. Thrilled that he finally faced a massed enemy army, apparently willing to fight, Napoleon was unaware that the bulk of the Russian force was already making arrangements for an immediate retreat and that they had pushed forward. Unbeknownst to Napoleon, the Russian army retreated during the afternoon and night, which meant that the emperor's plans for a major battle collapsed. Barclay refused to fight despite Bagration's urgings. He attempted at offensive position but was useless against the fast French advance, didn't give him time to finish preparations. When the French army progressed, it encountered serious problems in foraging, aggravated by the scorched earth policy. After the victory at Vitebsk, Napoleon realized that the Russian could retreat easily at night, and his plan for major battle collapsed. According to the governor of Vilnius, Napoleon planned not to go further than Smolensk and make Vilnius his headquarters for the winter. However, he could not go back. At the end of July, his position was unfavorable, there was heat during the day, and also at night, he had lost a third of his army due to sickness and straggling. The Russo-Turkish War ended in 1812 and Kutuzov signed the Treaty of Bucharest. Napoleon's former ally Bernadotte had signed an alliance with Russia and broke off relations with France. Napoleon's brother had resigned and decided to go home. For Napoleon, he lost the opportunity to destroy the Russian armies separately. On August 4th, the corps of Barclay and Bagration finally united in Smolensk, and on August 5th they held a council of war. Under pressure, Barclay decided to launch an offensive and the Russian force was sent west. Napoleon hoped that the Russian advance would lead to a long-desired major engagement and remade his plans. On August 15th, Napoleon celebrated his 43rd birthday by reviewing his army. In late afternoon, Murat's cavalry and Ney's infantry closed up to western side of Smolensk. The Battle of Smolensk now begins. Smolensk was a historic fortress city of 12,600 people, defended by a bastion, towers and a thick stone wall. Dnieper River ran through the middle of the city, and the Assumption Cathedral in Smolensk had one of the most venerated icons of the Orthodoxy, including Our Lady of Smolensk attributed to St. Lucas, and Napoleon assumed that the Russian will defend it outside the city. By August 16th, 45,000 French forces found the city heavily garrisoned by 30,000 Russians under Bagration and Barclay. The main battle was fought on August 16th. An initial probing force captured 2 suburbs but failed to bring the Russians out to battle. Napoleon ordered a general assault with 3 corps of his army, supported by 200 artilleries. This was initially successful, the intense artillery bombardment setting the city on fire. French forces, however, lacked ladders or climbing apparatus to scale the city walls and were under counter-fire from Russian artillery. Napoleon surrounded the southern bank of the Dnieper, while the northern bank was guarded by Barclay's army. When Bagration moved further east, to prevent the French from crossing the river and attacking the Russians from behind, Napoleon began the attack on the Smolensk Kremlin in the evening. By nightfall, most of the city was burned by the French artillery. Barclay abandoned the city, destroying all ammunition, storages and bridges to hold out for 2 days while retreating. Around dawn on August 17th, the Polish forces successfully breached the walls, and in a few hours the main French force entered the city. Barclay retained forces on the other side of the river, preventing a crossing until the night of August 18th. The city was almost destroyed and the Russian general was humiliated. The French discussed their options or prepare for a new attack after winter. Napoleon pressed his army on after the Russians. Murat implored him to stop, but Napoleon could see nothing but Moscow. On 24 August, the Grander Army marched out of Smolensk, Eugene on the left, Poniatowski on the right, and Murat in the center, with the Emperor, the Guard, 1st Corps and 3rd Corps in the second line. Joseph Barbanegro was appointed commander of the devastated city and had to organize new supplies. After 5 weeks of war, Napoleon's effectiveness was reduced and 1/3 of its army had disappeared from desertion or death from all causes. The humiliated Barclay would be replaced by Kutuzov, who had more experience.